Well, of course, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist and general psychiatrist, and I am a member of the Life Members Committee of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Committee. I'm actually a co-chair and have been doing that for about 4 or 5 years now. And I am also a past president of ACAP, serving from 2001 to 2003. My inauguration was just after 9/11. And we were in Hawaii. In fact, we weren't even sure we were going to hold a meeting that year, but we bit the bullet and we did it. And it was a beautiful meeting. Ever since I was a child, and I'm talking about uh, around 8, 9 years old, my father had a book at home called The Household Physician. And this is a book. I grew up in a British colonial country, Trinidad and Tobago. And this is a book that the British gave to their missionaries as they went into colonies, vast and wide across the world. And it had about every disease known to man at that time, and had wonderful pictures of every body part, of what a disease might look like in terms of the dermatological expression. And I was fascinated by that book. I would spend hours reading that book. And actually, that's the book that made me interested in becoming a doctor. And I never changed my mind after that. But then as I began to study biology, and we studied the brain, it was for me the most fascinating organ in the body. And I felt that I wanted to really know more about the brain. My mother was an amazing woman, very bright, very well read, and she herself was fascinated by what she called the power of the mind. And we would have amazing discussions about that. So as I continued to grow up, I really began to look at stuff about the brain. And most of it had really had more to do with neurology, as we know neurology. And I did not find that particularly interesting, because to me it was like math. You do this and then this, and you touch this and this happens. But what was the most fascinating was what the brain does. It thinks. And fortunate for me, and this actually is genetic, I don't need a lot of sleep. So there were many nights that I was awake in bed and just thinking. And I laugh about this now. I used to just essentially, what I learned later was free association. And then I found myself having started at one point in thinking and way off someplace else. And I found that fascinating, that the brain can move from one thing to the next to the next. And then I used to do strange things like try to think backwards and go. So I was just enamored of the brain. And as I, became more educated, I found that psychiatry was the body of knowledge that may hold the answers for my questions. So that's how I got interested in psychiatry. Number one, I just love working with the people I call patients. I do not call them clients. And what I enjoy most is the engagement. And for me, especially now that I've been in the field for over 40 years, is to see that this intervention can really change the trajectory of someone's life. And I always, when I do training, when I train residents, and we also practice a psychiatry with adults. And I say, for every adult you treat, there's a wounded child inside. And that's why I think everybody should do child psychiatry and then adult psychiatry. And that in addition, the adults are parents, many of them are parents, and that by helping them to gain the insights into their own issues and the things that are problematic and get in their way, that you aren't working with one person. Because when you free that person up, you really work with the families. And that, because of how long I've been in the field, I've been able to see over and over again. And for me, that's my joy. That's okay. I think I could come up with an answer. So at, my training director, I went to Georgetown Medical School, Georgetown adult training and fellowship training, and it was a wonderful place to be. My training director got us involved with ACAP very early on, so that as a fellow, I started going to ACAP meetings and then being mentored by our attendings. One of them brought me into the private practice committee. So we were thrown into ACAP and I really loved it. It turns out, I found out later, I love systems anyway. And ACAP was actually not far away in terms of the headquarters at that time on New Hampshire Avenue in Washington, D.C. And we were encouraged, which was wonderful, by our teachers, mentors, to submit, sometimes submitting along with them for a presentation, to submit. In those days, you could submit a case, a fascinating case, which I did. And so very early on, I began to participate. So it became my professional home very early and a place where I felt very comfortable. So when you ask about a single event, there are, there's one that stands out, okay, and I'll tell you why. So Richard Cohen was the president of ACAP at the time. And by that time, I would say I was maybe early mid-career, and I was participating in committees. And so I was known, and Richard Cohen knew who I was. And he was walking through the halls one day at one of the meetings, and I, said, Dr. Cohen, I have something I'd like to bring to your attention. And what it was is that it bothered me that we were the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and I actually spoke to him like that, and that we did not have a child abuse committee. By that time, I'd become much more aware of child abuse and, the awful things that go on and then the suffering of the children. And so he looked at me and he said, Marilyn, you are right. He said, I'll make you chairman and you go form a committee. And that's how it happened. And by that time, I knew a number of people who would be interested. So I was able to recruit members. And because we were in Washington, D.C., and I believe by that time I was working at Children's Hospital and they had a child abuse section, I was able to engage people who were very much involved in advocacy and also actual work in child abuse. And the following year, the meeting was in DC, and I was able to get some of these people to come and speak and form a child abuse committee. So that's to me one of the most momentous occasions. That whole thing about values, I go back to family values. And my father was an educator. He subsequently became superintendent of schools. My mother was a homemaker who started out with teaching. In those days, you started out as sort of an apprentice, but then she got married, had children, and then 9 children. And in those days, she was a homemaker. but she was a homemaker, very, very bright, very interested in the community, and had us all engaged in the community in lots of different ways. She founded birthday clubs for the kids. We had tea parties for everybody's birthday. She did Christmas caroling and got children and, found a choir director to make us sing. She made little capes for us. We went around the community. So there was a lot of community engagement and my father did the same thing in his role as, at one time he was a school principal, etc. And they were even politically active in the sense that, there were 9 of us and we were all hands to work, and we would take flyers around the country, not the country, the community, and distribute, etc. So community engagement, service, and most of all, being compassionate, recognizing the dignity in all human beings, and just integrity. So I would say that that's what I learned at home. And we also grew up as practicing Catholics. And in fact, all the schools that I went to up until I went to college were all Catholic schools. So that was also another layer of um, morality that was infused into my whole sense of values. Okay, so I've always been a member of APA, but I really wanted to give my heart to ACAP. So that's where I have really focused all of my activities. Um, I have also been involved in a number of other child-serving organizations. I've been on the board of the Child Welfare League of America. I've been on the board of the Devereux Foundation that serves behavioral health for kids. I've been on the board of the University of Pennsylvania School of Social Work. At Columbia, I was on one of the small boards having to do with serving kids. So, and locally in Washington, D.C., on the board of a Chance Academy for serving kids who were poor and to give them an opportunity to go to a very well-planned educational experience. So again, I think that follows from my parents and always involved in the community. So with ACAP, it's a big professional one that I've been involved with. You know, as I said, my training director, he got us involved. And once I got involved and got engaged with people, it just kind of built on itself. I never, I never thought of becoming president of ACAP. Um, it's funny that Richard Cohen, the one who I spoke to about the Child Abuse Committee, he once came to me and said, Marilyn, one day you'll be president of ACAP. I never thought of it. Well, number one, at that time, it was mainly older white males who were president. I didn't see myself reflected there. But I loved the organization and just kept working at it and got nominated for different positions. First of all, the council, and then for secretary, and then for president. And each time I was nominated, I won, and I was, you know, pleasantly, happily surprised, but it wasn't like I focused, this is what I want to do. It just kind of evolved naturally, And I think that in terms of leadership, I think that perhaps that is something that other people recognized in me. And I've always kind of been a little miffed because so often other people have recognized something in me that I would say it's there, but I didn't own it. And then circumstances, mentorship, whatever, facilitated sort of the expression. And it's so funny to go back a little bit about leadership. I told you I'm one of 9 children. And when I was doing family therapy at Georgetown, we were learning family therapy. One of the things we had to do was to analyze our own families. And with such a large family, it's broken down into subgroups. And what I learned then is that I really demonstrated leadership skills even within my family. And of course, in looking back, you begin to see it. And I think it's because I just was very close to my mom and I just learned everything she taught me. And she was quite a leader in her community. Okay, so first of all, we have to say what it was. And it had to do with taking care of foster care, addressing foster care issues, child maltreatment, and trying to make some effort to bring more awareness. Because what I found is that even in training, there wasn't much being done, being taught about the whole business of foster care, child abuse, etc. But even more compelling as to why this became an issue for me, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about it before, some people have. My father, at 8 years old, was a victim of serious physical and emotional child abuse by a stepfather. And he actually ran away from home at 8 years old. 8 years old. He ran away from home and ended up in Chinese. Trinidad is multiracial, and the British had brought Chinese, Indian, East Indian, and Black indentured workers to Trinidad. So we have quite a mixture in Trinidad. The Chinese definitely became more of the merchants at that time, and they had a lot of what we call shops, little like convenience stores, okay? And so he ran away and went to one of these families where they took him in, but then he was subjected to child labor abuse. And my father sat with me, and I still have the tape of it, and told me this story. And, he talked about how horrific that was. So then he ran away from there and essentially began wandering and was found by a nurse in the British world. We call them spinsters. She was unmarried, a spinster nurse, and she was a head nurse at the local hospital, and she took him in. And he was extremely bright, and he used to teach himself to read before. So even when he got to her, and he, you know, in terms of his experience, they would have put him back in school. He got not only into the same grade as my mother at the time, but she said he was so bright he kept skipping grades. And this nurse took him in as her only child. And when he told me the story, he was weeping and he said that was the best day of my life. So Trinidad did not have any kind of formal foster care thing. But the fact that this woman took him in, nurtured him, loved him, educated him, set him on a trajectory that here I am, his child, and there are 9 of us who are all, professionals, and you're talking about not even skipping a generation. So I actually did a presentation at ACAP about interrupting intergenerational trauma and spoke about my family. And I felt that this was something that we needed to address more. So it was from a very personal kind of thing. And also in my training, seeing that it was not being addressed, I felt this was a need and that I wanted to elevate it. I'll tell you, after I had founded the Child Abuse Committee, so this is well after I had done that, what we struggled within ACAP to get anything on the program having to do with child abuse. It was just not a tough, you wouldn't believe it, you're so young. We could not get it. And so, we had to push. I'll tell you, one of the first things we did was to write a letter to the research committee. Peter Jensen was in charge of that at the time, saying that we thought that they were missing an important variable in doing their research because nobody asked questions about child abuse. And we thought that all the subjects, you know, many of them would have been victims. So we felt that we needed to raise awareness, and over the years really have done that. And I'm very proud of the status of the current committee and the work that they're doing. I drop in, and at every annual meeting, I always visit their committee. And I don't know if you know this, but the one of a woman with whom I was on a board, she just sort of became impressed by me, my work, and she gave an endowment to ACAP to start the Marilyn Benoit Child Maltreatment Award, which was just so touching and so meaningful. And so that day that I stopped Dr. Cohen and said, we need a child abuse committee, has led to quite a lot. And I'm very happy about that. I think, and again, I had a training director who led us. I think that hopefully through maybe attendings, through knowing a child psychiatrist where they are, they can begin to talk about some interests and help, and they can be helped to reach ACAP. However, even if that person doesn't exist, they can call ACAP because we now have a very vibrant MSR committee. It is just amazing. Those young people, where they find time when they're in the middle of training, middle of medical school, to do the kind of organization that they do, helped, of course, by Annika at ACAP, who is an amazing staffer. So I would say that that's where they start. Reach out to the MSR committee, but get involved. That's the way to do it. Because once you get involved and you begin to network with people from different places across the country, and even if you don't really meet up too much during the year, but you meet every year, it is amazing to me what relationships I have built over all these years through just meeting at ACAP, reconnecting, and very special. It just reinforces that identity of being a child psychiatrist in a very positive way. Okay, so one of the major ones that I engaged with and when I did my presidential initiative, and I did this, you what do you call it? The, what do you call the person who's coming to be president? So you have time during that time to begin, kind of setting some infrastructure for your presidential initiative. I was connected to the Child Welfare League because, guess why? Because of the Child Abuse Committee. And they're a national organization. So I reached out to them and began a conversation about us being jointly on a national level promoting a whole foster care awareness program. And we were able to get 70 child serving organizations, national. And that was how the presidential initiative money was spent to bring people together, to begin to, identify areas that we felt we could shore up. One of the first areas we talked about, and there's still a posting on ACAP, was the whole issue of I felt the misuse of medication in foster care. And, you know, the speaker at the last meeting, he still speaks about it. And we know it's still happening. You read all the Medicaid medication reports, and that really bothers me. But I think that more and more people are being concerned. Well, there's a lot of intersectionality. Number one, as a woman, uh, and I don't know if you're aware, I'm the first person of color to be president of the ACAP. I'm a foreigner. Um, you know, I love being a mother. It's what I wanted to be before I even wanted to be a doctor. So when I got into medical school, I also got married and I deferred because I wanted first to have a child. So I went to school with my daughter, 2 years old, who is now also a doctor because we say she couldn't help it. um, and I think that all of those factors, you know, it's racial, it's religion, it's gender, it's your status within a family, all come together when in my work, because I think that it allows me, you know, with sort of multiple facets of identifications. Yeah. And I think it's very enriching. And I feel very fortunate that I have an ability to really relate, I would say, to every and anybody. And as I said to you, I grew up in a very multiracial society, so that there wasn't any one race that I felt, oh, I could only belong here, because I myself am multiracial, three different races, Southeast Asian, African, and white. So, and then in Trinidad, you just relate to all these different people. So I felt that that was very enriching, and still today serves me very well. Because I went to Howard University, pretty much an all-Black university. Then I went to Georgetown University, white, and was one of the of two Black women, first in the history to graduate from there. And but you know, interfacing with lots of different kinds of people has been enriching for me, and I think that I'm pretty good at it. You know, I've thought about that, and I think the most common thing about being a psychiatrist is that sometimes we're not seen as doctors. And I'll tell you one experience I had. I had, I have always seen adult patients. I've split my practice to 60-40, 60 child, 40, because number one, I felt it was made it a more interesting practice. But number two, as I said before, adult patients are parents. And I feel that I'm treating children through the parents. But I had an adult woman come to me, and she had a lot of anxiety. She had also gone to a cardiologist, and you know, very often people with anxiety think they're having a heart attack, etc. Anyway, I started seeing her with psychiatric issues, and she had a mildly elevated cholesterol. I mean, her numbers were not bad. And the cardiologist wanted immediately to start her on, you know, medication. She decided she didn't want to, that she wanted to manage her anxiety by seeing a psychiatrist and to manage by lifestyle changes in order to bring down her cholesterol. One of the things I always like to do is to collaborate with other doctors. And I reached out to this doctor, and he just blasted me that essentially you're not a real doctor, you're a psychiatrist. What are you talking about? Anyway, long story short, she did not go back to him. She chose to do lifestyle changes in psychiatry. She did well. But then I have another very good story about collaboration as a psychiatrist. Another adult patient, I diagnosed adult ADHD, which was quite significant, affected his job performance, family relationships. Um, but he had, this was in the early days of cardiac bypass, okay? And, you're given a stimulant and you have some concerns about it. I was able to talk to his cardiologist who listened and listened to what they did. In those days, you could do that. He admitted the patient overnight to the hospital and gave him a challenge using the stimulant medication and monitoring. Yes. Isn't that wonderful? So, two different stories, but one respecting me as a physician and psychiatrist, the other one just denigrating the fact, just heard the word psychiatrist. Yes. I think that most of all, approach people with an open mind. Don't be defensive, okay? The other thing is, as much as possible, if you can speak their language, don't go in talking psychiatric lingo. And, I'm not just talking about physicians. I also went back to graduate school and did essentially an MBA. It's called an HSA, Health Services. I focused on health services. And so, for instance, in my last sort of corporate job, where I was chief medical officer, I had to deal with the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer, the CEO, and I knew the language to talk and talk about return on investments. And if we do this clinically, then this. Similarly, I think when we're talking to other physicians, we need to talk to them, not coming across of just talking about the psychiatric aspect, but talking about our patient as a whole health patient. And because I think we could always meet in the middle there and then move on from there. It's been, I would say, I only had one other physician who was dismissive of one of my patients. When I tried to collaborate with her, she was only saying, oh, it's just in his head kind of thing. Yeah. But I haven't had that kind of response very often. Most of the time, I find that I can kind of meet people sort of more on their terms. Well, like I said, I've always wanted to be a doctor. And I I was a good student, a very enthusiastic student. And in those days, they used to let you skip classes if you did well, so that I started high school at age 11, having skipped. And I mean, and then at that time, high school was 5 years and I did 4 years. So, but I love learning. I love school. So at 11, I was doing Latin, French, Spanish, English, everything, chemistry, biology, and I loved it all. I I, I don't know what to say. Then, you do well, the teachers like you. And I got great feedback from teachers. I also, I mean, was chosen to do some really special things, like spend 2 weeks at the university and be with the university students doing biology and zoology, which was just exciting. So I feel very fortunate that I had great experiences. Just loving it. And the other thing about our field is that there are so many ways to be in either child psychiatry, adult psychiatry, all of it. So I have been in private practice, which I've always maintained. No matter what I was doing, I've always said to my bosses, I need to have. So I've always been in private practice. I love clinical work. I've been in academics in all three medical schools in Washington, D.C., Howard, GW, Georgetown. I love teaching. It's, I feel so fortunate to get to do all these things. Um, I love connecting with the community, like I thought of like my parents. So I used to do pro bono stuff. I would go to a family night at a Baptist church in the basement and talk about child development. I would go to PTA meetings and just talk about kids and what's good for kids. Um, Also, there's the forensic that you can actually do some really good work in that area. There's so many things. Of course, I've worked in foster care, and I still do that work. Um, and I just think I have never been bored. And I'll tell you, the one area that I wish I had had more opportunity would have been research. I did a piece of research in medical school, which got published, and my first peer-reviewed, etc. Um, but I wish I had had more opportunity, and particularly now with the brain research exploding, I wish I could be 30 years younger, and I would definitely be in there. But in order to fulfill that gap, I actually I'm a patron of brain research at MIT, and every couple of years they invite me to these what we call speed meetings where all the researchers come and they give you their research on what's going on. And then I receive all their bulletins, and it's just, so I try to keep in touch. I just wish I could be doing it too. That has always been important. I'll tell you, again, you go back and you say, I can learn a lot from my parents. They're my heroes. My father would be up at 4 o'clock every morning exercising. Daddy always said that a healthy brain needs a healthy body and exercise. I mean, he was a national bike rider, race rider. He always was busy. My mother, she was busy, like she said, doing housework. And she said, because in those days, you got down on the floor and you scrubbed the floor, okay? You didn't have a washing machine. So as she said, my body is working all the time. Um, but that all aside, I have always maintained exercise. My kids grew up with me exercising. I embarrass them wearing my exercise clothes in the mall with them. They want to hide from me. So exercise is important. I mean, even today, I went to a strength training class. I do that twice a week. I do spin bike. I do pickleball, all different things. But I remain very active. I think that exercise is actually the thing that we do not do enough. And I try to get my patients to engage in exercise because I think that it really decreases anxiety. When I tell my patients go walk it out, I train them to do mindfulness and meditation, deep breathing, deep relaxation. I train them with that and have them use their phones. Everybody has a phone, and record it and practice it at home. I also try to eat healthily. And I think very, very, very important, remain socially connected. And, just beyond family. And that's something that enriches my life. And I have wonderful friends. It's one of the reasons I don't like moving around. Like, I could have taken jobs, opportunities in different parts of the country, but I like being anchored and being connected in the same place. So I came to Washington and I never left. I would say that, at different career stages, sometimes you need different things. And even now, um, one of the people, it turns out, he led, when I used to be an examiner for both the adult psychiatry exams and child psychiatry exams. And I was one of the group, each group had a leader. And as a result of just being in that role with him, he then later invited me to become part of his faculty. And that was 30 years ago. He supported me, he promoted me, and today we are still friends. That relationship has sustained. You know, unfortunately, some of the people unfortunately have died. But I have to say that in both medical school and also my undergrad, not undergrad, fellow, general psychiatry and fellowship training, that some of those people are still, I'm still connected. Many have died, but, and you say how we do it. I think that one of the things is to actually plan social events. I think that that's important. And it really bothers me that we've gotten into all this virtual stuff. I know how efficient it is, but sometimes efficiency is not all that's necessary for human, wellness. And so I really, when I have residents, I would have them come to my house. We would also read non-professional books and come and have pizza and sit around. We had a house in the country and we invited them up for a day of just having fun. I think that the issue of having fun, even within a department, is important. And when I was, anywhere I've been where I've been, a full-time employee, it's something that I've promoted. And, I'm not wanting you to report, about what you've done every 5 minutes and that kind of stuff. People do their work. And I find that if you create an environment where people feel not only safe, but they can have fun, I think people work harder. I've seen it. I wish I had known more about how to get into research. Not that I would ever want to be a full-time researcher, but I would like to have more of it, have had more of it. Most of all, I look at my personal life. And if I want to keep my personal life, meaning my life and my children's lives, stable, then I have to really be critical about what I let in. And for me, that was the bottom line. It didn't make it too difficult, actually. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just add some more research. Yes, I love it. I love my work. every opportunity I have to reach someone, to help make a change, it's just precious. And I think most of all that we must show people that we respect their humanity and that we are not coming at them judging, but come with compassion. The biggest change that I am not happy with is that child psychiatrists, many of them, are splitting how they work, and they are being psychopharmacologists, and that they look for other people to do, quote, the therapy. So as I said to you, the thing that drew me to psychiatry was the mind. The mind has to do with the way people think, the way they behave, the way they feel, the way they interact, their quality of life, their sense of being. And there's no pill that can do that. And I just wish that we would really promote more of understanding the amazingly complex human psyche and how we can help when something goes awry, how we can actually help people heal really with that work. And it's work. And because I have been here and doing this for over 40 years, I've seen it. I know it. And it's just absolutely precious. So that's my biggest beef with the way things have changed. When I get a referral I work at a therapeutic day school, there's absolutely no social history. All I get is the behaviors of the kid, quote, how bad the kid is, but no context within which I understand the genesis of those behaviors. And if I don't understand that, I can't just go and just write a prescription for that kid. No. So what I'm doing at the school is really working hard at bringing in the parents, getting into social history, really understanding the ecosystem within which that child is being reared. And then, try to understand the kid. Number one, if you love children, you love the idea of children developing to their full potential. I think that studying child psychiatry, studying child development, but within the context of that child ecosystem is just very exciting. I can't tell you, there's not a dull moment trying to put the pieces together and understand, my God, this is what the grandma's influence living in this child, and I mean, I could go on and on because that's the way I think about it. Who are the people touching this child's psyche and how is it coming together in order to make this person who he or she is? It's just, for me, mind blowing, exciting, and doesn't cease to be.